Welcome to The Forgotten Soldier by Guy Sajer, a gripping and deeply personal story of a young soldier caught up in the chaos of the Eastern Front. These are his words. Let's begin. On a hot evening in the summer of 1943, we found ourselves once again in the immediate vicinity of the front. Belgorod had recently been retaken by the Russians, who had set up their advanced positions just beyond the town, inside our own lines. The front, which ran through Belgorod from Kharkov to Kursk, was more or less quiet. The campaign, which had continued almost without a break since our withdrawal from the Belgorod-Voronezh-Kursk triangle, had been exhausting. The Russians were now catching their breath and collecting their innumerable dead before launching an even stronger attack against our positions in September. Kharkov had remained in our hands after the slaughter at Slavyansk, and the Russian breakthrough on our southern front had finally been stopped somewhere near Kremenchuk. The Soviets had regained some of their strength and had forced the German and Romanian troops to withdraw from the Caucasus and the Kalmyk Plain. They had also pushed us back from the Donets. However, the situation was not yet entirely in their hands, and strong counterattacks from our side often broke their frantic thrust. Belgorod, Kharkov, and Stalino all figure prominently in any account of German counterattacks. 60,000 troops took part in the Battle of Belgorod. I was one of them. 18,000 Hitlerjugend had also arrived from Silesian camps to receive their baptism of fire in this unequal combat, in which a third of them lost their lives. I can remember their arrival very well, in brisk columns, ready for anything. Some units carried flags with inscriptions embroidered in gold letters. Jungj Lowen, or The World Belongs to Us. Platoons of machine gunners arrived and infantry regiments loaded with bandoliers stuffed with grenades and motorized regiments with all their heavy equipment. The plain was covered with soldiers, and for the next 3 or 4 days more and more came. Then everything quieted down. By regiment, section, and group, we were all directed to precise locations, where we settled down to an armed watch. Once again, I speak as though we knew of the impending attack. In fact, we engaged in these preparations as part of the normal routine. As in the past, my comrades and I were used for 1,001 chores, which reminded us of the old days in the Rollbahn. It was suffocatingly hot, and the dried yellow grasses of the steppe did not hold down the dust, which was stirred up in clouds by the slightest movement. In the evenings, we sat beside enormous campfires and talked or sang. The front was some 15 miles away, so fires were permitted. There was plenty of time for an abundant correspondence with Paula, and I thought about her constantly. Then, one afternoon, we were assembled for distribution of ammunition. Each man was given 120 cartridges and 4 grenades. 10 of us, 9 men and a non-commissioned officer, were organized as an assault group. Hals was a machine gunner, one of 2 men with light machine gun Spandas, each with a number 2 man. There were 3 men with rifles, one of them me, 2 grenadiers armed with automatics and heavy bags of grenades, and a non-com. In total silence and with every possible precaution, we were led to a shelter near a large farm, right behind the front line. An armored section of the Grossdeutschland was next to us, with Tiger tanks and heavy howitzers pulled by tractors and camouflaged by real and artificial leaves. We walked past a table set up near one of the buildings, and a fat clerk took down our identification numbers. At another table, a lieutenant in the cavalry was studying a map, surrounded by other panzer officers and a couple of non-coms. With painstaking precision, we were taken from the farm to the place marked for us on the map. Suddenly, at the edge of some woods, I recognized the wide communication trenches, which led to the front line, and I think we all had the same thought. Now we're in for it. All around us, other groups were taking up their positions. We formed part of Company 5, which was sent down a communications trench cutting in at right angles and leading to the brush where the trees stopped. The engineers must have really sweated, cutting through all those roots. Everywhere, sections were settling in, improving and deepening their shelters. It was about 6 o'clock in the evening, and the heat of the day was beginning to slacken off. We followed the trench out of the woods and across a range of low hills with wooded crests. An officer, with his eyes glued to a map, showed us the way. We turned off to the right, which brought us back under the trees where the heat was trapped and much more oppressive than out in the open. Everywhere, men pouring with sweat were jostling each other, looking for their positions. Finally, we came to a large, half-covered shelter packed with young soldiers from the Hitler Jugend. "Halt!" shouted the non-com who'd been leading us. "You'll split up here and take your positions when the order's given. Your Feldwebel will explain what's expected of you." He saluted and left us with the Hitler Jugend, who were sitting on the ground or squatting on their haunches, talking gaily. I went over to Hals, who had just put down his MG42 and was wiping the sweat from his face. "Hell," he said, "I was better off with my Mauser. This damn thing weighs a ton." "I'll be with you, Hals. It seems we're part of the same group." We compared left hands, which had both been stamped 5K. 8. "Nah, what does that mean?" asked Olensheim, who had just come up. "Our group number, Gefreiter," said Hals. "If you're not in the 8th, we don't know you." Olensheim looked anxiously at his hand. "Damn, I'm 11. Do you know what that means?" "Not I," said Hals, "but ask Corporal Lensen. He must have an inside tip." "We're going on a picnic," Lensen said, laughing, secretly displeased that his rank did not let him in on the secrets of the gods. One of the Hitler Jugend came over to us, as pretty as a ripe young girl. "Do the Soviets hang together in combat?" he asked, as though he were inquiring about an opposing football team. "Extremely well," said Hals, sounding like an old lady in a tea room. "I was only asking because I thought you looked experienced," he said. We were all about the same age. "Let me give you a piece of advice, young man," said Lensen, whose tiny promotion was, after all, worth a little something. "Fire on anything Russian without the least hesitation. The Russians are the worst sons of bitches the world has ever seen." "Are the Russians going to attack?" Olensheim looked very white. "We'll surely attack first," said the beautiful young man, whose Madonna face was incapable of a ferocious expression. He walked back to his gang of boy companions. "Do you think someone will tell us what all this is about?" Lensen said, in a voice loud enough to be overheard by the Feldwebel. "Shut up!" shouted a real veteran, sprawled full length on the ground. "You'll know soon enough where they're going to do you in." "Hey!" one of the Hitler Jugend took him up. "Who's the shit talking like that?" "You shut up too, you crapheads," said the veteran, an old man in his 30s, who must have been taking it for several years now. "We'll have enough of listening to you when you get your first scratch." One of the junge Löwen got up and walked over to the veteran. "Sir," he said in the assured voice of a law or medical student, "will you please explain your defeatist attitude, which is sapping the morale of everyone here?" "You just let me whistle my own tune," said the other, who appeared unimpressed by a flowery turn of speech. "But I'm afraid I must insist on a reply," said the young man. "And I say you're a bunch of fatheads who won't begin to think until you've been cracked on your nice little skulls." Another of the young Hitler boys jumped up as if he'd been shot. His features were regular and firm, and his steel-gray eyes reflected an unshakable determination. I thought he was going to rush the older fellow who wasn't looking at anyone. "Do you think we're still tied to our mother's apron strings?" he asked in a voice as steady as his look. "We've been through months of training too, and we're just as tough as you. We've all been in endurance squads. Rummer," he said, turning to a friend, "hit me in the face." Rummer jumped to his feet, and his strong, nervous fist struck his friend in the mouth. The latter staggered for a moment under the impact of the blow, and then walked over to the veteran, who decided to look up. 2 streams of bright red blood were pouring from the mouth of the junge Löwe and running down his chin. "Fatheads like me can take it just as well as bourgeois shits like you." "All right," said the veteran, who had decided against coming to blows ahead of H-hour. "You're all heroes." He turned away and tried to whistle. "How about writing to your families instead of squabbling like this?" said our Feld. "Mail will be collected in a little while." "That's a good idea," Hals said. "I'm going to write to my parents." I had a letter to Paula in my pocket, which I'd been carrying around for a couple of days, waiting for a chance to finish it. I added a few tender sentiments and sealed it. Then I wrote to my family. When anyone is afraid, he thinks of his family, especially of his mother, and as the moment of attack drew closer, my terror was rising. I wanted to confide something of my anguish to my mother and felt that somehow I could do it in a letter. I had always found it difficult to confide in my parents face to face, even the slightest of crimes, and had often criticized them for failing to help me. But on that occasion, I was able to express myself. Dear parents, especially Maman, I know you must be quite angry with me for writing to you so little. I have already explained to Papa that the life we lead here leaves almost no time for letters. This was not strictly speaking true. I had written to Paula at least 20 times and only once to my family. At last, I want to ask your pardon and describe something of my life here. I could have written to you in German, Maman, because I'm getting much better at it, but it is still easier for me to write in French. Everything here is all right. I've finished my training, and I'm a real soldier now. I wish you could see Russia. You can't imagine how huge it is. The wheat fields near Paris seem like tiny gardens compared to what we have here. Now it's as hot as the winter is cold. I hope we won't have to spend another winter here. You wouldn't believe what we went through. Today we've moved up to the front line. Everything is quiet, and it seems as if we've just come here to relieve our comrades. Hals is still my best friend, and I have a good time with him. I think you'll like him when you meet him on my next leave, unless the war is over before then and we're home for good. Everyone thinks it must be going to end soon, that we can't have another winter like last one. I hope that my brothers and sisters are well, and that my youngest brother doesn't broadcast my affairs too much. I look forward more than I can say to seeing them again. Papa told me that life was hard for you. I hope it's easier now and that you don't have to do without too much. Don't go short yourselves to make a package for me. I'm more or less all right. Dear Maman, soon I want to tell you about something wonderful that happened to me in Berlin. For now, I send all of you my love. I sealed my letter and together with the one to Paula handed it to the postman. Hals, Ohlensheim, Kraus, and Lenson all had letters too. Everything was quiet on that summer evening in 1943. After dark, of course, there would be a few clashes between patrols, nothing more. But that's war. Some of us were rounded up to distribute supper, which we ate late. We were forbidden to touch the few cans we had, for they constituted our total reserve. Dusk was falling when the Feld responsible for our section waved us over to him. We were soon listening intently as he told us what we would be expected to do. He had a large map of the district on which he showed us the points we should attain, taking every precaution. When the order was given, we should be prepared to protect the infantry, who would quickly join and then pass us. We were given a list of rallying points and other details which I only partly understood, and advised to rest, as we would not be called before the middle of the night. We stood and stared at each other for a long time. Now we knew. We were going to be part of a full-scale attack. A heavy sense of foreboding settled over us, and the knowledge that soon some of us would be dead was stamped on every face. Even a victorious army suffers dead and wounded. The Führer himself had said it. In fact, none of us could imagine his own death. Some would be killed, we all knew that, but each one imagined himself doing the burying. No one, despite the obvious danger, could think of himself lying mortally wounded. That was something which happened to other people, thousands of them, but never to oneself. Everyone clung to this idea, despite fear and doubt. Even the Hitlerjugend, who spent years cultivating the idea of sacrifice, couldn't consciously envisage their own ends occurring within a few hours. One might be exalted by a grand idea based on a structure of logic and even be prepared to run large risks, but to believe in the worst is impossible. Finally, night came, a soft summer night, which brought with it a breath of freshness after the torrid day. Everywhere free of the war, people must have been stretched out on the grass beside their houses, enjoying the season with their friends. Sometimes, when I was small, I used to take a walk with my parents before going to bed. My father believed one should enjoy these summer evenings to the maximum and kept me out until my eyelids drooped with sleep. Hals pulled me back from my thoughts. My dear Sajer, be sure to look out for yourself when we get going. It would be too stupid to get killed just before the war's over. Yes, I said. That would be stupid. All of us were haunted by so many thoughts that conversation was impossible, and each of us was obsessed by the particular question, how shall I come through this time? In the depths of the covered shelter, one of the Jungen Löwen was playing quietly on his harmonica, and the voices of his companions joined softly in the melody. Then the sound of gunfire made us jump. Here we go, we thought. But everything quieted down again. Lenzen came up to us. The first Soviet line is less than 400 yards from here, he said. The Feld just told me. That's really not very far. But it's not too bad either, said the veteran of a little while ago. At least we can sleep in peace. At Smolensk, the Popov's holes were less than a grenade's throw from ours. No one answered him. I'm commanding Group 6, said Lenzen, and I have to get right under Ivan's nose to keep him from moving when the assault troops begin their attack. You can imagine. No. We'll have it about the same, said the sergeant who would lead us. According to what I've heard, we'll be right in line with one of their positions. We listened attentively, hoping that our part of the enterprise was not going to be too dangerous. But the Russian scouts are sure to see us, cried Lindbergh, horrified. That's crazy. That will be the hardest part of it, but let's hope the night is dark. Also, we've been advised not to fire before the attack, to get into position without any noise. Don't forget mines, said the veteran, who in fact had not gone to sleep. The ground was checked for mines by details from the disciplinary battalion insofar as possible, the non-com retorted. Insofar as possible, sneered the veteran. I like that. All the same, you'd better be careful if you see any wires. Don't go tugging them. If you keep on like this, Lenzen shouted in a threatening voice, I'll put you to sleep until the attack. He shook his stubby-fingered fist under the older man's nose. The veteran only smiled but didn't say anything. What if we run right into Ivan? Asked Grenadier Krauss. Then we'll have to use our guns, won't we? Only as a last resort, the non-com answered. In principle, we're supposed to take them by surprise and knock them out without any noise. Without any noise? What did he mean? With the butts of our guns or spades? Asked Hals anxiously. Spades, bayonets, anything. We've got to get rid of them, that's all. And without raising any alarm. We'll take them prisoner, murmured young Lindbergh. Are you off your rocker? Said the non-com. An assault group can't take prisoners during a mission. What would we do with them? Hell, said Hals. You mean we'll have to skewer them? Lost your guts? Asked Lenzen. Hell no, said Hals to show that he was a man, but his face was white. I glanced at the spade pick hooked to my big friend's waist. Then we had to stand up so a Hauptmann and his group could get through. Where are we exactly? Young Lindbergh asked naively. In Russia, said the veteran. No one smiled at this feeble joke, and the non-com tried to give us a rough idea of our position some 3 miles northwest of Belgorod. I'm going to try and sleep, stammered Hals, who was clearly shaken by all these preparations. We lay down side by side without bothering to undo our bedrolls. The steel of the Spandau machine gun, which Hals had set up pointing down the length of the trench, gleamed with a dull luster. Sleep was impossible, not because of the discomfort of a night out of doors, strapped into all our gear. We'd done that often before, but because of our anxiety about what lay ahead. Hell, I'll have plenty of time to sleep when I'm dead, said Grenadier Krauss in a loud voice. He stood up and urinated against the wall of the trench. I lay awake for a long time, thinking and thinking. Finally, I did sleep for about 3 hours, until I was wakened by the distant sound of a motor. My movement woke Hals and Grumpers, the other grenadier, who was lying beside me with his head on my shoulder. What's the matter? He groaned sleepily. I don't know. I thought maybe they'd called us. What time is it? Hals asked. I looked at my school watch. 2:20. What time is dawn? Asked young Lindbergh, who hadn't been able to sleep at all. Probably very early this time of year, someone said. The sound of engines continued. If those drivers keep it up, they'll wake every one of the goddamn Ruskies. We tried to go back to sleep but couldn't. About half an hour later, we heard a muted noise of bustle and commotion just beyond the walls of the covered shelter. In the darkness, we guessed that we were listening to some fellows collecting their gear. We all turned toward the sound, trying to grasp what was happening when a Feld appeared, wearing camouflage. Groups 8 and 9, he asked in a low voice. Present, answered the two group leaders. You'll be leaving in 5 minutes by way of Access C and will proceed to your respective positions. Good luck. He pointed to a small sign, scarcely visible in the darkness, marked with the letter. All our reflections came to a dead stop and our brains emptied, as if we had been anesthetized. Everyone grabbed his gun and checked the critical points of his harness and straps, as Hauptmann Fink had taught us, especially the chin straps of our helmets. Hals lifted the big light machine gun onto his shoulders, and Lindbergh, who was his number 2 man, slipped his slender silhouette in beside the man he was supposed to serve. Only the veteran, our second machine gunner, behaved as if he'd forgotten the object of all these preparations. His movements were not marked by the febrile haste which characterized the actions of all the rest of us. He knew all this from before. He propped the heavy light machine gun against his leg and waited for the order to move out. I hope you're in good shape, he said to the gun, grinning sardonically. Group 8, called the sergeant, sounding as if he'd been struck by a sudden electric shock. After me and silence. We took exit and, sticking close together, followed the trench to the forward positions. Our non-com was at the head of the column. Behind him came Grumpers, the grenadier, who was about 22 years old. Then Hals, just past 18, and Lindbergh, not quite 17. Then our 3 gunners, a Czech of indefinable age with an unpronounceable name, a Sudeten of 19, whose name ended with an A, and me. Right behind me was the veteran with his number 2 man, another terrified boy, and finally Grenadier Kraus, who must have been well into his 20s. We moved out in good order, exactly as we'd been taught at Camp F, where we'd sweated so hard. That concludes the 17th part of the story. Thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe for more episodes and leave a comment.